Welcome back to the Data Doesn't Equal Outcomes podcast, where your host, Tristan Keelan, and his guests explore everything about data, from culture to metrics to telling quality improvement stories for the human side of analytics. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Data Doesn't Equal Outcomes podcast. My guests today are Larry Smith and Josh Cantwell from Grand Mental Health. This is part two. Previous episode can be found wherever you get your podcasts. And today, Larry and Josh are joining us again, this time to talk about outcome-based treatment planning. Please refer to part one for an overview of Grand Mental Health, services, and geographic areas if you want to get some background on the organization. So Larry, Josh, thanks for joining us again. I want to start with definition, real simple. What is outcome-based treatment planning? How does that differ from traditional or historical treatment planning?
Tristan, we do everything with an outcome in mind. So it made total sense to have an outcome-based treatment plan instead of a service treatment plan, to where you're going to do these things. And I'm going to let Josh talk more about it from a clinical perspective. And so, Josh, you want to talk about the outcome-based treatment plan and how it was designed and what it does for us that's different from a service-oriented treatment plan?
I'd love to. And first of all, we're really glad to be back. Thanks for having us, Tristan.
Thanks for being here.
So I think the easiest way to have the conversation is to tell you what it was like. Really, it's similar to the way we made the decision to do some other big changes or re-envisioning of how things are right now. We were finding this paradigm and this conundrum that we were in, where we had two competing phenomena that were not really adding up. So we had this idea of being an outcome-driven agency, and this we talk about it all the time. Every place that we went to talk about something, it's like we're thinking about the outcomes and we're outcome-driven. And then we're looking at our service array and our processes, and we're looking at this antiquated treatment plan that is so far from outcome-driven. We've tried to make it outcome-driven for many years, but so anybody that does a treatment plan in a mental health form, it looks like this. I am going to tell you, I'm going to sit with you, and you're going to identify a problem area. And so let's take depression, for example. So we got a problem area of depression. As a practitioner, I'm going to go in and I'm going to say, okay, you know what we're going to do? We're going to do cognitive behavioral therapy. We're going to do it one time a week, and we're going to do these things. We're going to process this, and we're going to explore this, and we're going to do that for 6 months. And I'm predicting that you're going to get better in that time, okay? Because I'm going to do this. This is my job. This is your job. And then guess what I do? I don't think about that treatment plan again for 6 months. And then 6 months comes around. I sit with somebody. You know how I know this? Because I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I did this for 20 years. So I sit with somebody, and then I'm like, oh. I look at it, and I already know it didn't work, because I've been working with them. So I know what I'm doing isn't really having the results. But I wait till that 6 month period of time, and then I'm rushed. First of all, I'm sitting there with them. I've got 90 minutes to complete this session, and I'm going to review all these things that we've done. And I'm looking back with them. I'm like, well, guys, our results are underwhelming. Also, I'm not really wanting them to get that much better, maybe, because then what am I going to do when I need to see somebody this next 6 months? And so usually what would happen was I'd say, well, that didn't work. Let's give it another 6 months. So first of all, I wasn't looking at I was never taking a look at the progress in a time period sufficient to make an adjustment to have good outcomes. And then I was just continuing this process. So it was this proverbial idea of doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. And so we just said, you know what, we're going to do a hard stop. And there was multiple reasons for it. So if we're looking for the reasons for it, we were looking for a few different things. We truly wanted to be able to impact change during the course of that treatment plan. But we also wanted that treatment plan to be a living, breathing document that was live all the time and up to date. And there was multiple reasons for that we'll get into, but we wanted it to guide care. So we were so far beyond this point of it being a hurdle to jump through to get paid for treatment, because that's everything that we did was we looked at the standards and we were ticking and tying actual verbiage in a standard and putting it into a treatment plan, layering it on there so that it met these standards and it never met the needs of the people being served. There's our first piece of this. Okay. There's the need. So what we did was we did a hard stop and we said, first of all, it is going to be the hub when we're talking about technology and programming. It's going to be the hub of everything we do. From that treatment plan, you will be able to generate everything that you need to so the spokes that come off of that are going to be all of the needs that that person may have, but it's going to be a two-way street. So that's not unique, because when you're doing treatment plan development, usually you are saying that we're going to do these type of services with this frequency, but the difference is we wanted there to be a two-way communication between those service types, so that if somebody was in a clinical session doing an individual therapeutic session, they in that section, they're like, well, oh, here's another problem area, or this is another objective we need to add. They could do it right there on that same screen, and it would update the treatment plan immediately. And then also at the end of every session, the treatment plan is updated with the progress from that session immediately. Treatment plan is updated. Okay, there's another piece. Every validated instrument that we use and every assessment that we use also updates that treatment plan. So what that means, on the face sheet of the treatment plan, there's trends. There's trends of outcomes. And we're looking for 3 different outcomes, okay? Because we want to be able to make real decisions. So the 3 outcomes that we're talking about are going to be validated instruments measuring that area. So if we're talking about depression or suicidality, really like a PHQ-9 that we're going to be doing over time, and we're going to trend those scores out, and it's going to be there live, real time, what the trends are. It's going to be the level, the course of treatment that you're in. So if I'm recommending a 16-week course of CBT, I'm going to be able to see how far along those deliverables I am. So if I'm obtaining, or if I'm completing objectives or benchmarks or different tasks that are within that treatment plan, I'm going to see how far along I am, because it should start telling a picture. And then the other piece is going to be client report that they give at the end of every single session of their level of functioning related to that area. So if I'm talking about depression, they're reporting whether their depression is improving or getting worse over time. So what that gives me is 3 distinct data points that should be trending in the same direction, or something's wrong. So that means if I'm taking validated instruments and they're showing me that the depression is getting worse, and then a client telling me it's getting better, there's something to look at there. But more important than that, those are usually going to line up, okay? So more important than that, I've got client report, I've got validated instruments, and if I am not showing improvement and I am edging towards completing a course of treatment, or I'm showing decreased functioning as I'm going towards that course of treatment, the treatment I'm using isn't working. So I can do a hard stop, rapid change. So we're talking about being nimble and failing fast, even with our therapist. So if I'm 3 weeks into a course of treatment that is showing no results and they're actually getting worse, boom, stop, try another modality. But it's easy to do because I go right back into that treatment plan that's live, and I just adjust it. I just add a modality there. I add a course of treatment, and that's what I'm going to treat from that point. Now, the significance of that is that any given time, that treatment plan is up to date. So this whole thing of this is not a secondary benefit. This is absolutely a separate but equally important part of this. We are in a workforce shortage right now like no one has ever seen. The competition is not about getting the most staff that you can get to apply and hire. It's about keeping staff happy and making their jobs right sized and allowing them, giving them everything that we can. So we're looking at this treatment plan as a perk, because now we've been able to cut those treatment plan reviews in half, because they truly are just a review. So when you bring somebody in every 6 months to look at a treatment plan, it's already up to date. I'm not entering one thing into that treatment plan. I am looking at that live updated treatment plan and saying, guys, this is how you're trending over time. How are you feeling that the treatment's going? It looks like we maybe need to make some adjustments, which I've already been doing through the course of this. But the significance is I can do that in 45 minutes, right? Well, I'm talking hypotheticals kind of. Let me give you strict numbers. It was taking over 90 minutes per treatment plan update. I have over 350 therapists doing those. So that's for every one of them, they've got 40 to 50 clients on their caseload. Twice a year, I'm taking that much time for every one of those clients. Another way to look at it is 14,500 clients 2 times a year at 90 minutes, and I've cut that time in half. That's 10 FTEs that I've saved by being able to do that and giving that time back to the therapists that want to do therapy and not do treatment plan updates. So we're letting the computer track the progress like it should, and they're able to get back to true clinical care. And so the satisfaction has been off the charts. And so we can advertise that to people when we're talking about this is we have this method by which you're able to have your treatment plans always live and up to date. So that's some of the benefits that we've seen so far, aside from those super increases in clinical visibility. Every day when we open somebody's chart and start working, we see that face sheet and how they're trending right now with any given problem that we want to look at.
And just as important as all of that, by the way, CBT, tell us what CBT is real quick, because people listening are not all clinical. Josh, if you go ahead and tell us what CBT is. Can you hear me?
Yes, I was just waiting for you to, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Okay. All right. So anyway, as important as all the other stuff that Josh just talked about, the client is actually getting better, and we can actually see it, and the client can actually see it. I mean, we are doing, the computer's feeding us all this information and keeping us a live treatment plan of how the PHQ-9 is doing and how the assessments are doing, but also the client themselves, and that becomes the therapeutic piece of this thing, is able to tell the therapist, yeah, I am getting better. These are the things that I've been able to do that I was not able to do prior to coming in for treatment. And at some point, we're going to do a discharge. At some point, I mean, it's usually when in mental health world, a discharge happened when a person got tired of coming. We're actually going to be able to do a discharge and say that you are better, and these are the reasons that you're better, and you're telling me this, as well as our data is showing this, and as well as our outcome is showing that. So congratulations, that we'll always be available to you, but man, continue with your employment, or go get employment, or whatever it may be that the person's really looking for an outcome to do. So I'm really excited about taking the outcome-based concept and putting it into the therapeutic setting.
And I've heard you talk about this before, Josh, in mental health, where, okay, a client maybe doesn't need services anymore. The business side goes, well, I just lost a revenue generating client for myself. And so we're always juggling, the business side is always lingering there in everything we do. But if you're planning for the outcome from the get-go, you've actually accepted that clients aren't going to be with you forever. How does that reconcile with your business model? I mean, there's plenty of need out there, but does it take some of that pressure off of, well, I got to keep clients coming in and keep getting paid? How do you sort of balance those two concepts?
If we're looking at just being consistent with the way that we're talking about what our goals are, if the goals are strong clinical outcomes, that's natural that we're going to have an increase in planned discharges and people moving in and out of different levels of care. It's interesting, though, when we say timing is everything. So the CCBHC model really supports that. And when we're talking about cost reporting, we're talking about this. It's not that anyone would ever try to manipulate a system, but it's almost non-manipulatable. It's one of those things where, so as your clients, the number of clients decrease, your cost per client goes up. That means your per member per month rate would increase. It promotes this idea of letting the true clinical progress dictate where somebody is in that system, because we know that there's this fluid nature. There's this, when we're talking about levels of change, you do at some point hit aftercare level of change. You're in maintenance mode, and then you may have a relapse that constitutes coming back in. Our whole service array is built on that, though. Our whole model. Our model is based on this concept that we're going to have people being treated, that we've developed this very intricate team-based approach that has 3 core team members with the client as the nucleus of everything that we do. And so the core team members that we use a therapist that we call an integrated team manager. We use a peer recovery support specialist that's directly supervised by that integrated team manager, and a care coordinator directly supervised by that integrated team manager. And with those 3 individuals, we know exactly the resource of their time that they have monthly. So their average caseload is 40. They have 280 hours that they can give to clients from the 3 of them, 7 hours average per client per month. We know that that is really a kind of a baseline moderate level need for us. So that even comes with us from a fee-for-service model. That 7 hours was about a moderate level need. We know not everybody needs 7 hours. Some people need 1 hour. Some people need 2 hours. Some people need 20 hours. And so when we have this purposeful caseload acuity management, it puts us in this environment where we can't have everybody needing 20 hours on a caseload, or the job that I'm asking someone to do is not what they're capable of doing. I can't have everybody needing 1 hour on a caseload, or there's not enough work for people to do. So it's this flow of people moving in and out of these higher levels of need, which is what should be happening. Somebody should be moving from 20 hours of need to a moderate level to an aftercare level, and then if they do discharge from services and something that with their life circumstances that happen and they come back in, they're going to come back in on one of those different levels. But it's this idea of meeting people where they're at, treating people in the least restrictive environment early on, trying to prevent those higher needs. When the needs occur, addressing their needs, and then discharging people when they don't need us for services anymore. It's the only way that it works for us. So we've just fully embraced this idea of keeping the story consistent, because it is a story, and it's not, we don't tell it different ways to different people anymore. The story is, we're here to help people get better, and if they're not leaving our care ever, then are we really doing our job?
So the data analyst in me has a problem. And I need to change too in order to properly support this model. So my classical data analyst brain says, well, I'm used to tracking what's happening and then pinning an outcome to it at the end. But if you're already deciding what your outcome is going to be, then I need to help track what's going on inside the treatment to achieve that outcome in order to provide meaningful data back to the practice. So how do you this is going to sound like the funniest question given the context of this conversation, but how do you measure outcomes if you've already decided what they are? What are the meaningful data points?
I love it. So I think that
great question, this is a great question. Yeah.
So I think.
Go ahead,
Larry.
Yeah. You know, the outcome is what we're going for. And how we get there is really all of the stuff that we do to get to that outcome. So if you're measuring your outcome as your end data, what better way to have a great outcome than everything that you're focusing on is to get to your end data? And we didn't start measuring the end data. We started with an outcome in mind, and then the data was great data. So Josh, I'm going to let you explain it a lot better than that, but because it's a great question, Tristan, because data people think exactly that way. Go ahead. Yeah.
Listen, we kind of blew my mind, right? That question, because it's like, wow, man. But let me validate some of the things that we're doing. It actually put words to some of the operational processes that we've had to put in place. Because when I say, okay, anecdotally, we say Larry Smith hasn't had a bad idea since 2014 because he tells us he tells us the outcome. But it's another way to say a softer way to say what you just said, because we don't stop until the outcome is what we're trying to get. So there's all that adjustment in our last segment that we were able to talk about. We talked about that equation, and so that equation makes that outcome non-negotiable. The only negotiable piece is that process. And so now we've had to bring people in. This is the team that we have, and when we're talking about social sciences, specifically community mental health, really, when we're talking about the focus that we have on process improvement, CQI, outcome-driven care, we've taken it to the nth degree now. So we have on our team a CQI specialist, and I like to talk about him as people that have seen The Simpsons, which is probably not the best way to talk about nuclear power plants, but he is sitting at a control panel, and he's charged with a few things. First, he's charged with working with our data department to develop views. Most of the time, we're talking about dashboards to show where we're at with everything that's important to us and to determine real time daily if we're remaining in normal range. And the reason I talk about like a nuclear power plant, I don't have to do anything, but I have protocols that I would implement anytime something is out of normal range. So the first of all, it's understanding it's understanding. And the reason I know you're on the right track with that question is because we're not looking at the outcomes really anymore. The outcomes are actually the metrics that we're monitoring them, but we're not adjusting the outcomes. We're adjusting the processes. So he's looking as a CQI specialist at the processes, because how this works is when he sees something out of alignment, he's responsible for the root cause analysis that he then takes to a project manager. We have our first project management office that is in development right now. As a community mental health center, it sounds pretty funny that we have a project management office that's in communication constantly with our CQI specialist, because then he takes the root cause to the project manager to then work with the teams that can actually make change and do the work to adjust the processes to match the outcome we're looking for. We've done that. You just said it better, and I'm going to still that. I'm going to use the way that you talked about it into the future, but I know it's right because that's what we've had to do to support that way of working from the back to the processes.
Right. Well, thanks for that. But yeah, it does change, if you're going to do treatment in a non-classical format, then you can't do data in the classical format. So anybody listening, your data has to, if your clinic gets innovative, your data has to get equally attentive to that innovation in order to support it. That's my little soapbox. I got to go back to the technology for a minute. You talked about treatment plan automatically updating it. Talk to me about your widgets a little bit. How, you're trying to hire a new clinician. Your pitch to a new clinician is that your treatment plan automatically updates. Like, how do you get somebody to see what an that's not something we're used to seeing, right? An automatically updated treatment plan. Like, convince me, not because I don't believe you, but like, how does that look to somebody actually executing mouse clicks and keystrokes?
Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit to that, Tristan, because what we had to do is create an educational department, and we don't train we train animals, we educate people, and so when we are constantly have an educational department where we are bringing staff in and we are teaching them about the model that we use, and because it's different. I mean, if you hire somebody from a community mental health center that's never worked for us, it is a different job. Literally a different job than what you might have been doing at another community mental health center. But again, the goal and the objective is for people to get better. But as we look at this and we think about how do we educate people about how to use an outcome-based treatment plan and how to move through this process, because it's not simple. It may sound simple while we're talking about it, but it's much more complicated. And it's a good question about how do we get started? How do you take a staff member and train them and teach them, and then to for them to look at things differently and to actually do mental health in a way that we have found has some great success. Josh, I know you're going to not rattle on. You're going to talk a lot about that, because those are the kind of things that Josh deals with every day with our executive team, and making sure that this starts at the top and goes all the way down into our system of I always try to at least mention one time during any podcast, what our culture is to treat people with kindness. Kindness is probably one of the best things that you can do for anyone. And part of kindness is unbridled access, care when and where a client needs it, which is the what we talked about earlier with the iPads. It's not mental health doesn't happen 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. Being kind to your staff allows them to be kind to their clients, and giving all the things that they need to do to make people better and get people to accept life as it is and move forward with their lives individually. Josh, go ahead. That was my soapbox, Tristan, about the culture. The culture of your agency is very important, and we're trying to have a culture of just people being kind and
Well,
kind.
good investments in technology is also kindness. So
Yes, it is.
why don't you walk us through it, Josh?
It's being kind to yourself. Go ahead, Josh.
I think the beauty of it is it starts with kind of the parameters that we set when we have so many options for technology now. This is something that we're dealing with, is that we're bombarded with offerings and advertisements and us having a strategic mindset of how we're going to take these products and these technological advances and make our employment better. It's about adding value and making their job easier, and we run a risk. But your question is about, how do we train them to do these things? Well, if we have to train them to use the technology, then we may have missed the mark, because we're trying to make it automatic. And when we're talking about the things that we're selecting, we can't solve a problem with a solution that creates another equal problem for us. And so it has to be, that was one of the parameters when I'm talking about the decision making with this. Well, to them, for all intents and purposes, the education had to do really with the new way of entering stuff into the treatment plan. It had to be easier than the old way. So the trade-off was I have to learn something new, but once I learn it, it makes my life better. So that's the first piece. Larry spoke to the education. We have a robust education department. It almost is like we used to be a mental health agency with a small training department, and now we're kind of like an education agency with a mental health department. This is how big this education department has become. But so it's this purposeful way of teaching people, educating people in bite-sized, small, layered approaches to where it's sticking. First of all, continual education over time. But that on the back end, when they're actually doing the work, when we say this live treatment plan and how it feeds in, it's automatic. So there's no additional work that they have to do when they're going through their daily workday. That automation's on the back end, and we do that with multiple things that we're working on right now. It's actually one of our goals is to remove every barrier, because we're in a situation with financial things also, when we enter combinations of appointments, we don't want our staff to ever have to think about what that means, like the financial pieces of insurance and things like that. We don't want them to ever. So we're automating those pieces too, where when they show up, they really are doing what they're good at, what they went to school for. And so we're trying to automate those processes. And when we bring in other technology, it's with the sole purpose of making their job easier. And so that's the beauty of the question is, how do you overcome the barriers of having to teach them how to do this? The bottom line is there was very little to teach them. It was a new way of doing a treatment plan that happened to take the time of doing an old treatment plan. So the sell was easy. And as soon as they got it, and it's about how we do change management is the other thing. We have failed so many times when it's come, because you're hearing us talk about all of this rapid change, all of these huge overhauling of systems. None of these are small changes that we're talking about, huge overhauling. And we're actually talking about 10% of the changes we made in the last 4 years, even in the last two segments with you. So it's about adopting that as a core principle for an agency, talking about it every time you're talking to any staff member, that we value rapid change. We value your ability to adapt and adjust quickly. We're going to give you the support and what you need to make these rapid changes successfully with the least amount of impact on you personally and the people we serve. But that it becomes a core value instead of an accidental thing, right? So if we are making these changes and then we keep coming to staff, because this is what it could look like. If you do an overhauling of something and then us at the executive level are like, let's do CQI. Well, to people that are actually on the ground level, it looks like, well, they messed up. They're already changing this thing. Why don't you do better next time initially? Well, that's not it. They understand now that we're giving them an 80% cook cake. All right. That 20%, we're going to adjust that thing and we're going to continue to cook it as we add some more ingredients. But they know they're never getting 100% product. They're a part of that process. And it's about that buy-in, and it's about them understanding that there will always be adjustments along the way. But we've done such big changes now. Our feedback is getting better every time because they know the next thing's coming. And when something doesn't change for a while, it's almost like they're asking us, what's next? Like, why is everything so stagnant? This isn't grand, right? This is what's next.
We also, one of the latest things that we've added is AI. as technology develops, we're going to develop with it. We're not going to sit here and ignore all of the great things that are happening in our. AI has some problems and AI has some issues, but we're using the best parts of AI in our development of our technology and with our consumers and with our clients. So I just wanted to throw that in there because that was we're using a company called Elios right now, and they are really developing a lot of AI stuff for us to make our clinicians' job easier and to track some outcomes and do some other stuff for us. So anyway, I just throw that in there. It may be part of it, may not be, but
yeah. As somebody who has worked in clinical support areas, technology, data, I always preach that clinical people should spend their time doing clinical things, and the only way to do that is for non-clinical people to give them more time back. And at Grand Mental Health, how do we do that? Well, it's pretty easy. You need an educational department, a project management office, entrepreneurial software development, iPad asset distribution, and somebody monitoring the nuclear power plant better than the remember when Homer sets up the old thing that keeps hitting the button over and over again? Yeah, you got to keep your eyes open. You got to keep watching it. So we'll wrap this up for today. Really amazing stuff from Larry Smith, Josh Cantwell, Grand Mental Health. Thank you both for joining us. It's been really educational, and people are going to get a lot out of this.
Thank you,
Thank you very much, Tristan.